You say that once we eliminate the struggle, emptiness begins. What do you mean by that?
That's an essential question. The routine is a structure we can rely on, lean against. It is not the actual thing. It is the scaffolding, not the building. There is a way for us to live life without living. We can call it existing. The yogis now took it a step further and they said, oh, this is called vinyasa, or this is transition, but it's not enough. The yoga practice was not the center of their movement. To survive, to take water from the river, fighting, dance. There are many wishes that we distorted in the West. I wish for the end of suffering for all sentient beings. Then you wish for the end of the world.
All right. Welcome, you guys. I am here with a phenomenal guest, Ido Portal. Already feels like a brother. It's hard to describe him, but on first sight, I would consider him to be an artist, a mover, a philosopher, a real genius, and hopefully, in my words, and someone that's inspired me at the beginning of my movement journey, and has kind of been like the way I described to you, like this in mentor, because this is the first time we're meeting in person, but this invisible mentor that's really shaped the way that I see the body, the way I see the movement practice. And there's been a lot of incredible correlations to yoga that I feel like have just helped me in my teaching and connect with students. So it's a real honor to have you here in Miami, in my home city. And I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to take your workshop as well and integrate and embody all these philosophical things. So let's go ahead and just see where it takes us.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's just get right into it. You talk a lot about this idea of unstructured play. And I watched a documentary, I can't remember the name of it, but it was speaking about Wayne Gretzky, this hockey player. And I know you work with a lot of athletes. And they were saying how it develops this creativity. If instead of his father trying to tell him to do cones and drills, he built an ice rink in the backyard and just said, go out there and play. And I feel like he credited that a lot to just some of his genius and inner workings of things you can't learn in a structured environment. Does that speak to you at all?
Yeah, I think it was something that we let go somehow in modern culture and culture of practice. And it's a much more potent force for studying, for learning, for developing. If you look at kids and the amount of learning that they go through, not only physical, but mental, emotional, acquiring a language, learning how to walk, within a number of years, they'll go through amounts of learning information. It can't be even encapsulated or measured, but that will be, much more than a college professor. And it is done predominantly through play.
Yeah.
Play is such a powerful tool. Also with athletes, I often talk about it, that playfulness is often much superior to competitiveness. When somebody is super competitive and meets someone who can remain playful in the same scenario, so are different levels. Wow. So definitely this is an important way of interacting with a practice, with your self-development, with your studying, with your learning.
Wow. Not bad for first hand. Yeah, I feel like I found that to be coming from certain styles of yoga that tend to be more rigid. I know you often quote Bruce Lee a lot, and even just watching you move, you look very relaxed, even though I know there's a tremendous amount of discipline that you have as a person and that you kind of create that culture within your movement community. I feel like that element of play, that relaxed ability to just find flow state and kind of listen and receive the feedback from either somebody else or from your own, breath or bodily sensations. What is that? I guess, yeah. What does that look like? Because I think of people like Michael Jordan, right? They're just playing. They're not so rigid.
It's connected to not knowing versus the perspective of knowing that can take center stage. Like in a yoga practice, it's often there. Like, I know what I need to do. There is this sequence, there is these asanas, there is here are the kriyas, here are the pranayamas, here are the. But really, we're playing with a lot more of the unknowing, a lot more of the unknown. It will always be infinite in relation to the finite amount that we know. Playfulness acknowledges that. I'm playful because I don't really know. So I'm investigating, I'm researching, I'm sensing, I'm tasting. Yes, there is a bunch of stuff that I do know, but that is not the primary vehicle. Hence, in an advanced practice, you will see a lot more playfulness, a lot more listening, a lot more observation, and unraveling of the thread, versus the structured A, B, C. I going through these protocols. A lot of these days you talk about routines and protocols. You hear it all the time.
Yes.
What is your morning routine? Well, if I live by routines, it is a sad reality, right? Like we're waking up and we're going through this structure. We're not really improvising even in our lives. There is something there, to investigate and to ask.
Wow. Really well said. I feel like that affirms a lot for me because there's been moments in my life where I felt a little down on myself. I don't have the routine everybody else has, but maybe not having a routine allows you to be fully present and just kind of go with the flow of life, because life is constantly changing. Everything that we experience, we touch, we hear, is impermanent. And if we can really step into that presence, nothing is exactly the same every single day, or in really every moment if we bring it down.
And you can treat the routine with a freshness. So even the routine, eventually, it's not a bad thing. We can use a routine, but there is a presence that is there, which comes not from the routine. The routine is a structure we can rely on, lean against, but it is not the actual thing. It is the scaffolding, not the building. And then this presence, which is also related to play, to observation, that is what is actually inside the routine, feeds the routine. Or if the routine is not there, it is also present. Some practices expose that side of things and do not allow you to rely on a routine, like fighting. You can't, there is no routine. You don't know how it will unfold. And then other practices became more dead in that sense, where you can rely on routines, like certain dance choreographies, certain protocols, execution, and also yoga practice which came to the West and was put in another box, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
Very useful in the beginning.
Yeah.
As well. Important to say.
100%. I feel like as things continue to evolve, rules get broken, things start to kind of unravel, as you put it, and they just start to naturally grow, right? I mean, I feel like for yoga, like let's just take it back to Bruce Lee, another example. I know you've quoted him before. He was kind of outlawed by the Kung Fu community for kind of later on respected, but he changed up a few things and created this water way, right? Something that he had to break some rules, but you also have to master the rules to know them. But when I do think of Ido Portal, I think of you as this rebel to society, like in a positive way. Like everything that you do kind of creates power. Like I remember that example. Maybe you can share it, of like when you were in Hong Kong, you just put your backpack on and like, so I guess the question would be, first of all, maybe explain that example if people don't know it. I thought that was just so brilliant and genius, because it takes what you do in the classroom and you bring it into your life. And I feel like that's what yogis, their goal is to, whatever they're working on in the yoga room is eventually to impermeate your life, all your relationships. So to finalize the question, how has movement actually influenced your life?
Well, the intention is very simple. Like, why did we even begin this practice? Why did we even start? And it goes back to this investigation that many people lose track of.
Mm.
For me, it was very important to reconnect. Okay, I'm teaching. Okay, it became popular, less or more. Why did I even start? What was I looking for there? And did I gain it or not?
Mm.
That sends me back to my life and myself. A practice is a mode of becoming, it's a mode of being.
Mm.
Yeah, there is the official side of practice, but there is another side, the unofficial side, where the practice has to keep on living. It
Mm.
does not stop where you finish the session.
Mm.
So for me, that was always integrated. So I gave people the example like that thing. If I was in Hong Kong and, Hong Kong is a busy place, and then I would use the way to the facility or the gym or to photo shoot or to whatever as a practice. And since it's so crowded, I would put on a challenge for myself. I would kind of zip up my backpack and I would try to go in between the people and not get touched, or get touched as little as possible.
Wow.
It's anyone who's been to New York or Hong Kong would know.
I can't wait to try this.
Yeah. So in a way, it becomes playful and it becomes a practice, but in an unofficial way. Well, we kind of like, once you share it, it becomes official again, right?
Right.
But yeah, I think this is another missing component, that we do have a feeling, many of us, and I've seen it in myself, that we have a life, and then that we have this practice. But in reality, upon closer examination, I realized that I don't really have a life. That was the realization. It was some kind of an illusion of a life. And then I put together these practices, but upon closer examination, I didn't have a life and I didn't have a practice. Not Ido's practice, and not Ido's living, being present. It's a dream. Life was a dream, as it feels often. So that informed the mode of practice, opened it, modified it, required different ways of integrating it into life. And of course, this is the role behind yoga. This is the original meaning of the word union and the original investigation. It is a mode of becoming or being, and not some kind of a just limited physical aspect, it's an extrapolation. They took a piece of it, and the general public might be able to start from there, but this is not the end of it.
Definitely. Yeah, I love that you said that, because it seems that you started with the physical practice, then eventually you started to realize through the practice that you are not Ido, you are not even this practice. And then you came back full circle back, and then that helped to modify what you're doing.
Exactly.
In yoga, they often say that, the body is just a vehicle, right? We're this consciousness. It's impossible to prove that this cup is real without consciousness observing it. So that brings me to my next question: observation, awareness practices. I feel like your practice really embodies and heightens those senses, that understanding of or I guess, how do I say this? Not being aware, but what's being aware, coming back another layer. So how does the observer change the observed? Or maybe there's another way to put it, because I feel like if you watch me practice, you're going to ultimately change my practice just with your observation.
Yeah, the act of, before you mentioned briefly the word flow state, which I'm not using that word very often. I think it became a trendy term and a word, but it contains, by now, this word have been abused to a certain degree, and it contains a flavor which I think is counterproductive. The side of it which is counterproductive is that you disappear. When you're in this flow state, this immersive state, yeah, you're immersed. It's like watching a good movie. By the end of the movie, you go back into your body and your chair. This is not what yoga attempts to do. You're not supposed to disappear into the asana or into, whatever it is. You're supposed to be fully present in a deep sense of the word, not in the discursive way, I am here in words running in your head, which I refer to in this way as some kind of a double arrow. One arrow of awareness is towards the task, the asana or the partner or the opponent. The other one is watching yourself, observing yourself. If these two exist, you get into the real flow state, which is not called flow state often. It is fully immersive, you're fully present, but you're also aware, I am here doing this. You don't disappear. Not in words, again. You can repeat these words in your head, it wouldn't make it. It is more of this. I am sensing my body right now in this chair. I am here conducting this conversation. I'm not up here in my head with the answers that I give you. I'm no less embodied and present. So observation is very, very important. Without observation, you can do all those things. I can jump up here and do a one-arm handstand on the table. But in reality, most that do practice such high-level skill can do it without being present, or else they wouldn't be able to do it in a high level.
Wow. That's a really important topic, because I feel like for me, just to come back to the handstand, it's always been a posture that's required my attention the most versus a downward facing dog, just because for one moment, if you lose your balance, you're out of the pose, right? So it requires your full presence or attention.
So here there is an interesting thing we can unpack, right? First, on the way to get that handstand, you are required to be more present. But once you've gained that capacity, it becomes an anti-technology for presence. So in the beginning, it is a technology to get present. But after you've mastered it, you can think of whatever, of your girlfriend and do the handstand. So in that sense, what did I do to address this?
What changed?
I changed. I changed the practices. I keep changing the practices. So actually, I don't do one-arm handstand. You know why? Because I can do them. Most of my practices revolves around what I cannot do, not about what I can do, which means I'm always in the place of gaining the most. The same way when people mention the word mastery, I push it away and I say the master has nothing to gain. The student have everything to gain. Wow. You remember that excitement. Those people that come to you to study with you, right? They're in this fresh place of developing, of learning, while most teachers move into a dry place. I know. So again, like it doesn't mean that I cannot do a handstand, but it's not the core of my practice anymore.
Wow. I'm just continuously mind blown. I feel like a lot of these things are really resonating, because for someone like you that's mastered a lot of poses and a lot of movements per se, it's humbling to hear you say that you're constantly doing things that are outside of that scope. And I've even heard from some of your students just these like crazy experiences where they'll come to your workshop and they have all these moves they've been practicing, and then they come and then you start having them balance a thing on their hand and they can't do it. And the ego gets in the way, and it's pretty, it's just humbling to hear that you still, after these many years, have that beginner's mind. And that kind of brings me into my next question that I was personally really excited to ask you is, why struggle? Like, why create resistance for yourself? Why create, I guess, I quoted you in my notes, you say that once we eliminate the struggle, emptiness begins. What do you mean by that?
That's an essential question. This is a question I never directly was asked that question in this kind of a setting, but this is a core question that must be, first, it must be asked. About answering it, that's another thing. I'm not sure the answers are as important as asking the question repeatedly. First is why suffering exists to begin with. Yeah, we changed the word. We call it challenges. We call it, someone will use the word difficulties. But essentially, the core of it is dukkha. The core of it is suffering.
You know your Sanskrit.
So, so in that sense, before I asked myself, why do I engage with such a thing? I asked, why is it there to begin with? There are many wishes that we distorted in the West. I wish for the end of suffering for all sentient beings. Then you wish for the end of the world. You wish for the end of the universe. You wish for the end of each individual. This is actually a distortion, because that suffering has a very unique and irreplaceable role. It is tightly connected to the word practice. Practice interacts and offers its evolutionary forces for us through the mode of suffering and dealing with it. Now, we became hedonists. We became those that pursue the likes and avoid the dislikes. We can control the temperature in the room by a few degrees, and we're always so comfortable. We forgot that we are eating suffering, that this is our fuel, that this is one of our nourishments.
It actually allows us to grow.
Yeah, and even if it wasn't that way, we will be facing suffering. It's not even up to us. So what does the practice does? It acknowledges all of this. It is not becoming a sadomasochistic thing where I just go for the suffering, but it acknowledges a much more mature connection to suffering and starts to apply in relation to it. So when also other suffering arrives from the outside, the loss of our loved ones,
these are inevitable things.
Yeah, all these inevitable things that we know where we're heading. This is not living in here. This is dying. The name of the game is dying. You're born into the grave and you're heading there in high speed. But we tend to forget and then what do? We miss on all the heavenly glory. We miss on all the good stuff that being alive is about. Life is not for living. Life is for practicing. Wow. If life was for living, then as you live, so you shall die. Everything that you gained will be taken away, and doesn't make any sense. It's meaningless. Okay, I'm going to get all those asanas. But what will happen in 30 years? Nobody does one-arm handstands in their 70s. And then somebody comes up with that goal here in the US, right? I'm going to do my one-arm handstand at 70s. Yep. It's meaningless. Even if you do that, you will sacrifice other things by trying to pursue that. So this connection has to be present for us in the way that we practice, in the way that we are interacting. And then we can enjoy the beautiful and pleasurable things that come along the way. It's not about denying them, but we can also interact with incredible difficulties and come out on the other side transformed.
Wow. Practicing just pausing after certain conversations just to kind of absorb what was just said. But I feel like in that pause, there's so many avenues in which we could go from what you had just said. But I think just intuitively, the next kind of idea that I kind of want to move into is, you talk about suffering and how it's inevitable. And a lot of your movements, it's almost like you're eliminating resistance. Like all these forces are coming at you, right? Even in a practical like partner where you're moving and you're just trying to, like when you were working with McGregor, I noticed that maybe the practice is just not avoiding suffering, but just eliminating the resistance to suffering. Because
that's a big part of it. Beautifully said. And it's a big part of it. There is another suffering which we don't interact with. The suffering of suffering or the fear of fear. Like real fear, something happens, I'm afraid. Good, it's useful. But now we are stuck on another loop. We are afraid of being afraid. We are afraid of having pain. We don't have pain. We are afraid of having pain. This becomes the new, and that is totally useless. That becomes the second degree suffering, which is actually useless and it does not interact with the practice itself. So what do? You let go, as you said. So, okay, I see the limitation. I feel limited, but let me try to address the limitation. Sometimes it comes from an inner, like you recognize inside yourself what is actually holding back your movement. Movement is a lot about opening the window so air can come in. Stop pumping air into the room with crazy machinery. Open the window, the air comes in. It's an act of removing an obstacle and unleashing, changing the course of a river, you know? This is powerful.
It's very powerful. I think, you know, God, there's so many questions I have for you. I feel like movement in general has been sort of categorized, structured. We talked a lot about that. Even the aspect of man-made gyms, you know, before it would be silly to think of a room just created with a bunch of weights so we can go into that room and pick them up, and because it was something that was so essential in our everyday lives. And it kind of comes back to this idea of comfort, right? I read this study just recently that said the more comfortable societies become, the higher disease rates that we have. And I feel like your whole practice is about getting uncomfortable. And not only that, just coming back to our primal intuitive nature. And I think with the evolution of AI and technology, we're actually going to lose what we lost with our physicality, with the way that we think. So I guess my question for you is, you have a quote, you said, the more high-tech tools that we have, the more low-tech we become, or vice versa, the more low-tech tools that we have, the more high-tech we become. Can you talk about, I guess, the evolution of the movement, how we've come away from just simple movements, and then also maybe how AI and technology and wearables are actually limiting us? I know that's a loaded question.
Yeah, everything has a price, and we got to understand, we got to conceptualize the price before we interact in a new way with something. The problem is that after, it's sometimes impossible. Imagine, you know, taking the iPhone away now, or coming off social media, or whatever it is. It becomes, but remember that my Instagram was built by Conor McGregor overnight. That's it. It was before there were these big Instagram accounts. I used to have a relatively big account. Nowadays it's nothing, it's small, but it was built overnight. Now, I didn't have time to conceptualize or to prepare to understand what that does. Very quickly it became this business tool, another, you know, tool for doing things, but it also has a price. It pulls you, right, in all these ways. If we are becoming more suspicious in that way, we might not choose to interact with anything and everything. I bought a new iPhone yesterday, and now there is this Apple Intelligence. I didn't have it because I had an older phone. Immediately my thought was, wait, because it asks you, do you want to activate Apple Intelligence? It's like, wait, do I? It's not about answering it, but it's about already asking it. Then it says, it summarizes your notification. I had no idea this, because my phone was older. Again, I didn't have this option. I was like, no. Do you want to? No, I don't. I'm okay. I get a lot of messages, but I can still read them, and I can quickly, briefly scan with my eyes and know what's important, what's less important. I don't want to drop this stuff away. The thinking that most people have is, I need to clear as much as I can off of myself that I can be free to do what I really want to do. This is a lie. Most people end up doing meaningless shit. So they free themselves up. Yeah, the iPhone summarizes your messages, but you are freeing up time that you abuse later into meaningless stuff. So, and this keeps pulling us in that way. Nah, I don't need you to summarize my messages. I'm okay. It's not going to save me a lot of time, but it's going to, I need to apply myself. I make appointments with myself. I schedule things for myself. My practice is holy. I practice for many, many hours a day, 6 to 8 physical hours, but then like 12, 15 hours of like, within my meditation practice, somatic work, etc. Wow. I schedule it in. I put it in. I don't, because the moment I open it, things are going to get filled up. And with what? I want to make sure they're meaningful. I want to be with the people that I appreciate. I want to be in the presence of practitioners. And so I schedule my retreats and my way of doing things and work with my teachers and work with my close students, my inner circle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's everything has a price. Everything has a price.
Wow.
Nobody wakes up to do road work at 5 a.m. when they sleep in satin sheets. When you need to do hard practices, it's going to be affected by the choices that you've made.
Definitely. Well said. Yeah, I think everybody can relate to that. And I love that you use the modern analogy of the iPhone, because again, the more we rely on this Apple intelligence, the less we use our intuition. I mean, we have a gift of kind of seeing things as they come about and making those real-time decisions based on what we're feeling. And if we lose that, it pays a price.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your relationship with gravity. I just feel like, I think gravity kind of comes back to the suffering a little bit, but how does gravity, or even bigger than gravity, I guess, not to combine too many things, but how does the breath and the weight play a role in your practice?
The beginning of this investigation often in the West, and was also for me, fight against it, right? Because I was an acrobat, and I was doing those flips, and I was disconnecting myself, jumping and coming out, and this is true for many of the gratuitous forces, not only gravity. There are other gratuitous forces. The centrifugal effect, centripetal effect, Coriolis effect, and others. There is all these forces acting upon us. Also, there is a need to breathe, which you can conceptualize similarly, but so usually the beginning of the investigation is you develop attributes and skills that work against it. Like, for example, I used to practice holding my breath longer and longer in case I need. Or again, jumping higher, or applying, strength, or organizing the body against gravity. But this has first, it's not a very economized, very economical way of doing things. It's wasteful. Second, there is a wear and tear that comes through the collision of you versus these forces. Ooh. So you can easily see that people who engage with a lot of this investigation have short careers. You can see in sports that include a lot more of these, there is less longevity than in other places, because you make mistakes and wear and tear adds up. And these reactive forces within the body tear the body apart eventually. The next step is to allow gravity or other forces to act upon you. But here it's not enough to finish. If it's a river and you allow it, you don't swim upriver, you realize that it's futile. But now you're being dragged by the river. So that is also not a good option.
Right.
And then comes a third option, which is where we want to go towards. And that is to allow the river to carry you, but to start with your bodily motions or with a raft or with an oar to direct yourself.
Ooh,
right?
love that metaphor.
So gravity is acting upon me and it pulls me down. And as it pulls me down, I can organize myself and use that pull to create motion. Most people understand it in the direction of gravity or in the direction of the river flowing down. But there is even an option here to go upstream using the same force. How? Because when gravity pulls me down and I structure myself, I'm pressing into the ground.
Ooh.
And what does the ground do?
It brings you back up.
It presses me back up. I have this ground reaction force. So now I can use the force coming up. And there is a bunch of forces like this that are acting in unison. And it's almost like an elevator that you can take up and you can take down.
It's kind of harmonizing with the opposites.
Correct. Which is a very ancient, well discussed within the gunas, in the traditional,
I'm really impressed with I'm not surprised, but just your understanding of yogic philosophy. If you ever want to come teach yoga philosophy at our trainings, you'll always be welcome.
Yeah, the Samkhya talks about the three gunas, and later it was somewhat conceptualized differently within the Chinese traditions, Taoism. There you hear about yin and yang.
Yes.
But the gunas are actually more ancient and more encompassing because they represent the unification of opposites. Not
the unification.
The unification of opposites. The reconciliation and the unification of the opposites for a creation of something new. And now often this is also happens within Taoism, but usually it's not mentioned. They have the word yin and yang.
Yeah, and it's just those two polar.
The third one is not often. Sometimes people refer to it as the Tao itself, which is a different, point of view. So other times they refer to it by the word Tai Chi, not the martial art Tai Chi, but the concept of Tai Chi. So at other times it's different names.
Wow.
So in here, you get an opportunity. Just by the way, Heraclitus, the pre-Socratic Greek, also talked about this. We talked before about the word pantarei, all in flux. This is the flux that allows the opposites to unify and to interact. The outcome is not known. We can move down with gravity or against it, or stay in between the pull of gravity and the ground reaction force or other forces. For example, elasticity. Gravity pulls me down. Now I have this potential energy that I can release through the elastic components. That's how some of these kids are jumping, have these crazy vertical jumps. When you measure their squatting numbers, you have nothing. They're weak. But they're very good about creating this structure which uses gravity extremely well and not just creates a huge engine. You see that their legs are quite skinny and not that muscular, but they can, dunk a basketball easily or have their head over the hoop, in some extreme cases.
Really good point. It's not always about equal and opposite force. It's about being able to utilize the opposites. Like in yoga, we speak about, effort and ease, things like sukham and stiram. That's another really, there's so many opposites that we can utilize, but I love your perspective, or the one you mentioned about how something new is reborn from unifying those opposites.
Yeah.
You get a third option.
Yes.
And with the river analogy, I really love that because it kind of reminds me of like, there's certain, if we even take it outside of gravity, there's certain things that direct our lives, right? And depending on which belief system that you attune into, if we look at karma, there's certain karmic patterns, these emotional imprints, they're called samskaras, that kind of direct our life. And if we're never able to witness or step back and observe those patterns, they end up we kind of become a prisoner and they just direct our lives. So I feel like, your movement practice, like all these, it's really interesting to take a peek behind the curtain of what influences your teachings, because ultimately this is just a tool to direct our lives. And seeing it just makes it more purposeful. And I can tell, like within your community and all the teachers and students that you've had, there's a real purpose behind the practice. It's like something else. It's not just about the way it looks. It's not just about the patterns themselves. There's something bigger, something greater.
And it's important. It's important even one step further, that there is no reason for the practice. It's even that. So even
you
if
you gotta be careful with that word purpose. There's actually not.
Yeah, because you said it beautifully. You say it seems like there is another purpose, but that purpose, you climb up a ladder of these purposes and ideas. First, you want to have a beautiful body. Then you want to have beautiful movement. I'm not into the body is not that important if it's beautiful or not. I want to move beautifully. Then you want to live forever. Then you keep changing the purpose, and it corrupts you each time. Not that each one of these purposes are wrong. It's great to have a beautiful body, try to live longer, etc. But the practice has to be a unique phenomenon. It's my mode of being and becoming. It is, and that in that sense, I cannot allow it to be corrupted by some lower purpose. Most people, they come with a purpose. But if they stay within the practice and within the honesty and the observation, they will change purposes over decades. And, most don't make it to decades, right? And then eventually they would get to this open field where the practice has no reason to practice for practice sake.
Wow. Just to practice for practice sake. Don't eliminate this purpose, this reason. It's just what is. I remember the first time like I said, you've been this invisible mentor for me for many years, which I'm extremely grateful for. But I went to go take a class with Sean, and it was my first time, and I was kind of like nervous, and there's 3 people in the class, and he just had us stand. And I didn't really know what was going on. I kind of assumed it was some sort of meditation or just stillness. And then it kind of started to leak into the rest of the practice. It was the framework. It was the foundation. Tell me about stillness, because without stillness, you can't have movement. I've heard you say that. Why is cultivating stillness important in one's practice?
Well, like we said before, there is a way that we can do all these movements, all these beautiful asanas, movements, without being there. There is a way for us to live life without living. We can call it existing. We can separate it from living. To truly be alive and to exist are 2 different things.
Very much so.
Right? One of these ancient metaphors, life is a dream. It keeps repeating. Another metaphor from one of these archetypical metaphors is death, sleep. Sleep is a metaphor for death. And living is a dream. What is living? Where do you dream? When you're asleep. So living is actually death. You close the circle. In which way? We are not really here. Yeah, your cells can right now pump blood around and digest your breakfast if you've had one and breathe. You have the capacity to do, I can do a one-arm handstand and continue to run these thoughts. But now I'm not even present there. Stillness goes back to that. So Sean, in the local community that we have here called the Republic of Movement, where they are practicing some of my ideas, it's a very close community to me. Sean and Eileen run it. And what he did probably in that class is he started from emptying. And then he allowed the rest of the tasks and the movement of the class to build upon this moment.
Definitely.
That is very important. And that is the way of yoga. Yes. That is also the way of yoga.
It's eventually, yeah, it's like you starting from that place allows motion, but most importantly too, I feel like the motion and the breath, it all brings you back to that place of stillness because that's where we're all going. I've also heard, I love that you brought up the sleep state because I've also heard some teachers call that our default state, like that. And then everything that we're living is just a dream, it's an illusion. Really interesting concepts to just be aware of because it does ultimately shape how we interact, how we become aware.
There has to come first an understanding or a sense that one is asleep. Many people don't reach that place to feel something is off here. There is the glitch in the matrix, right? Like that is kind of the something is off here. Look around. And also another thing, look in the mirror. When I was a child, I used to stare in my eyes. In the mirror for a long time. Sometimes I would forget myself, the diving into the eyes.
Wow. Like almost a self eye gazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can, there are the practices of that, what's called direct transfer or eye gazing or many other or practices with the fire kasina, working with flame, tartaka. Yeah. So all these are modes of awakening to something. But how can we awaken? How can we awaken? And so it starts with this awareness. Yeah, and that's what we call awakening. We made it into something esoteric, but it's awakening from the slumber, from the sleep.
And you think this is achievable, like for the modern human in one's lifetime?
This is such a general question. Who is that modern human? Most will not.
Yes.
That is the reality. That is the pragmatic reality. You don't need to ask me. Yeah. You can look around.
You can look
Most will not. Why? Not because they can't, because they don't want. There are equal opportunities in this regard, but we are not equal. There are equal opportunities, but everyone is offered the option here, but we are not equal. Each one of us comes from a different journey. And this schooling, which we receive here, which we call life, is about awakening to that. In order to awaken, one must first die. Right? We are under the impression that we need to live. But in reality, we first must die so we can actually be born, the second birth, the real birth, this awakening from that sleep. And that has been mentioned, in the ancient scriptures, in, all religions, in Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Taoism.
We're just coming back.
Yeah, this death is a death of what? Is a death of the illusions, of that construct, of that ego, of that self that is not really the true self. And that is something that the practice should be moving us towards.
Wow. Just take a moment. I wasn't expecting this conversation. Well, I actually came in with no expectations, but it's exactly what I needed to hear. Let's put it that way. I have a few more questions for you, mostly just bringing it back into the physical body, because I feel like a lot of people who are listening are either students or teachers or practitioners. And you say in one interview, I think this was a long time ago, in that first Strength Project video that really inspired my movement journey, you said everybody is a teacher. And I think this is an interesting conversation because a lot of people come to teacher trainings, they want to learn. You said, I love how you said this. You said everybody at the crosswalk, they ask for directions. There's this natural draw to share information. That's the first part of the question. Why do we want to teach? What is that pull? And then also, how do we be the best teacher because you often said the parent doesn't teach the child how to walk, it just walks. So what is the role of the teacher?
These two questions can be connected somewhat. It's nice. First, a lot of people, the motive to teach, for many, the initial motive is to be in a place of knowing, in relation to someone who does not know. This is corrupted somewhat, but it can still be presenting itself as helpful, and it is helpful, but it comes from a place, let me help you. I know, you don't know.
This is really
right. Like this is a very basic thing.
I know something that you don't know.
Yeah, let me help you. It's almost like a trick, like, again, I dislike this kind of a thing I'm going to present to you a trick that I do. And then you will say, wow. And then you'll try to do it and you won't be able to do because I practiced it. So what's the meaning of it? Those kind of coordination tricks.
Yeah.
It's like, look, this is real coordination, like this, But what's the deal? If I practice, I'm going to also be able to do it. What I'm more interested is in something else. I show you something that I cannot practice. Ooh. And then I place it in front of you. And I facilitate the conditions in which first I demonstrate, so I'm able to do it even though I haven't been able to do it. For example, to fight. I can't prepare for an exact fight, right? Like I have to have the capacity to do that. Or if I need to improvise now, if I just need to move, I can do it. This is for me movement. But I've met many people, yogis, dancers, when it's time to just move, they don't know what to do. Right? And then they'll try to string some techniques and, like most people on Instagram, most people who are presenting incredibly beautiful things, but when you meet them, they can't move. They can't problem solve. They can't organize themselves in relation to the task. So this is a different level of teaching.
Wow.
And then what is teaching? Yeah. Teaching is facilitating the conditions in which the person, the student, will teach themselves. Because if not, then I'm giving you the answer like we got in school. And schooling comes from this industrial schooling educational system. What is the capital of whatever? And then, no, yes, I'll tell you the answer. Where's the magic? Where's
the curiosity?
Where's the curiosity? Where is the real skillful thing? or I give you a math problem that I've already solved and I challenge you with it. It's not the same when I use a math problem that I didn't solve myself and I take you through the process of solving it in front of your eyes. Do you understand? It's not the same as asking 1 + 1 = what? And then you say 2 because I already knew the answer. But it's something else.
So the student gets to witness the teacher also in that state of not knowing, which you said earlier.
And then what happens is people are often not impressed. Because if you'll see me practice in my day-to-day, you wouldn't be impressed. Why? Because I'm challenging myself and I'm going back to that shoshin, that beginner mindset, and I'm dealing with stuff that I cannot do well. Yeah, I can impress you easily in a variety of ways, but I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in impressing myself. Which I've yet to impress. So in that sense, the teaching becomes not showing you what I can do, but showing you a process of getting into that doing, getting into it, and then transferring it onwards to you, etc.
Wow. You said a lot there, but it really resonates, especially leading these teacher trainings. People come and they expect to learn, they expect for you to show them things. And the first exercise that we do is we actually don't teach a class. We just put a little music on and we just say, for 1 hour, just move or just flow. And, at first there's a lot of resistance. People don't know what to do. They start looking around, they start going back into the patterns and people have such a hard time with it. And it creates a lot of rigidity. So it's such a beautiful thing to practice of like, what is movement for you if you just let go? And I love that idea of figuring it out with the student, because not only does that create, it takes away the hierarchy, but it also takes a lot of vulnerability from the teacher. Like, for you not to know, it's like, whoa, it's like, this is humbling. This is like, you have to put yourself in a space that's open to receive so your students can also do the same.
Yeah, I just open an atmosphere with the student or with the person in front that I also fail, that I also make fun of myself, that I create that, or else I'm not really sharing anything of meaning. Yeah, I can pull out a one-arm handstand, but that's again like that trick mentality is not going deep enough.
Definitely.
Right?
Wow. All right, I think I have just one more question for you. The last question will be more along the lines of, what are some practices, some simple practices maybe one can introduce without any sort of background, which they might actually have an advantage over a lot of people. It's usually the people who think they know a million things struggle the most in your workshops.
True.
I guess let's just talk about, we talked about the breath a little bit, but since the breath is such a powerful part of the practice and the breath is connected to the nervous system, I know this word somatic is used a lot. It's becoming a trendy word. I know you've been using it for years. How does the breath play a role in the way that you facilitate, and how ultimately does that connect to the nervous system? Because I know everyone's just trying to put themselves in this rest and digest. We're always living in this state of fear, this fight or flight reaction.
Well, first, I will say something that maybe is not often said, but you're better off not messing with the breath.
Ooh. Like not to control it?
An attempt to control it, to study it, like cerebrally, to engage with practicing it from a place of knowing and modifying it. There is more trouble there than to be gained.
Interesting. I like this.
One can work its way out of the issues, but I've seen a lot of people who've damaged themselves by doing direct, knowing breath work. So observing the breath, that's something else. That's something else. So there are other ways to interact with breath work, but trying to control it, to press it down, to change it, to modify it, has been something that I've seen a lot of issues with. And it's important to mention because it's not often mentioned.
This is actually liberating. I'm glad you have this approach, and I'm curious to hear more, because I think people overdo it. They try to put themselves in certain states and hyperventilate themselves. And you can tell, like, just by observing it, it doesn't look very healthy or productive to put yourself in those extreme levels of hyperventilation.
It goes back to this place of knowing. We know here is a protocol, here is pranayama, here is tumo, here is yeah, okay, I went and I studied this stuff, but for movement and for our lives, this also has a price. Not saying that if you practice some kind of a breath work, here and there, you're going to kill yourself. That's not the idea, but you create a relationship which is very hard later on to change. Many yogis have this problem, not only with the breath, but also with movement. Yogis are some of the worst movers I often meet.
Wow.
But of course, they think that they're great movers and they're not even aware of it. And I tell you something else. I have many friends that do body work, and it's known among therapists that yogis are some of the most rigid bodies to receive body work, which is funny because they're the most flexible.
That is counterintuitive.
Yeah, but little things like the sternum, the rib cage, little actions are sometimes totally locked.
So what are some... So interesting you say that. Why are they the worst movers? Is it because they lack structure with over
Exactly
flexibility?
the opposite, that they have too much structure. They're so stuck in a box that they're even surrounded by a box. It's called the mat. They even drawn the box around themselves.
It's the alignment is the antithesis of...
It's the knowing. It's the knowing. It's everything comes back to, I know the asana. I know what is in between the asanas.
Because all the asanas are
most of it is in between asanas.
It's the transitions.
Right? Yes. So what happens there? The yogis now took it a step further and they said, oh, this is called vinyasa, or this is transition. But it's not enough. When you're going to go to the party or you take a yogi to a contemporary dance class, they often can't follow. But if you take the contemporary dancer to yoga, they will do great.
You think they're a teacher.
You think they're the teacher. Now, That's perfectly fine, because yoga never attempted to be about movement development.
Because it's non-competitiveness. It's just
first, it's not
self-acceptance.
competitive. Second, it comes from a time where people were moving a lot. The yoga practice was not the center of their movement. To survive, to take water from the river, fighting, dance, all this was always present. The dance of Shiva, the Kalaripayat, even the modern names, but there is even more ancient, like the Dravidian, the Indus Valley culture. So actually yoga was this another practice which already came on top of a physical lifestyle. Now in the modern times, yogis filled a gap which was there. You can say it was the first popular attempt to be movement practice when it started to spread around. When I look around on yogis, especially those who practice early on, the early second, third generation, 1960s, 1970s, went into India, brought information. Those people were actually interested in a movement practice. Mm-hmm. But the closest you could get back then was yoga. And they received also great tools for some movement practices, but also some tools were missing. I mentioned in the past, you're not pulling barely in yoga because you don't have an anchor point. You don't have a bar or rings. So the pulling is not really pulling against a point. Yeah, there is some asanas that mimic the internal pulling.
Yeah, like the bandhas and things like that.
Yeah, but it's not really. So all of this brings you to, I go back to the point. All of this has to be examined in the way that what we are practicing, and then you will understand that creating too much definitions around one's movement, technical definitions, asanas, libraries of information, or with the breath, sometimes can be counterintuitive, sometimes can be counterproductive. Wow. Then we can go back to other modes of practice, like observing the breath, like observing one's movement, like creating tasks and situations in which I facilitate the conditions that you will teach yourself how to move. I use a lot of this. I drop a ball, or I give you a stick, or I try to hit you with something. And these things create the conditions in which you will learn how to move your body, really. But I'm at no point I am telling you, this is how you should do it.
You never would say, like, even when you bring out the stick, by the way, if you signed up for training, there might be a stick on the first day. But you're not like, move your left hip back as you draw your left shoulder. No, it's just, you teach with motion.
Yes. And I can add that aspect. I can come in and I can say, look, let's examine what you did here. And let me share with you, here is a technique, or here is a way, but it's not the core. The core is the glue in between the motions. By the way, this is the reason why in modern fighting, in UFC, in MMA, who are the dominant force across the board? Wrestlers. The least technical discipline. Actually, wrestlers would not agree with me. They think they are technical. But in reality, it's a lot more the glue between the techniques that they specialize
That's
on.
why there's no, I want to be careful saying this, but that's why if you take a UFC guy and bring him into a boxing, they usually, I know actually Conor McGregor did very well against Floyd when you helped him.
But he was training boxing from a young age. Okay. That is his background, boxing.
But most strikers, or most UFC guys have trouble striking. They're more dominant on the ground.
Yeah, this is more common because it's such a basic thing. Wrestling is not actually that sports wrestling. All animals wrestle. The cubs wrestle with their parents and in between themselves. So it's almost like a way of learning one's movement. There is wrestling all over the world. India, traditional wrestling, Africa, European traditional wrestling, Chinese, Shuao Jiao. There is endless. Everybody wrestles.
Everyone.
So it's what do they attempt to do? It's some kind of a movement education, self-education. We should have wrestled with our parents. We should have climbed our mother when she holds us and wrestled with our father. It's part of our movement education. But nowadays, the parents are not knowledgeable enough.
Or we just have put ourselves in these soft containers and We've eliminated that. But that's kind of like that, allowing yourself to play in the mud and wrestle. It stimulates growth and it stimulates creativity. Just to really quickly close that conversation, I think it's very enlightening for yogis to hear, especially what is one thing we could bring into our practice or perhaps let go of in our practice to get the most benefit, or to serve us, I should say, not to get something, because we're not obviously trying to desire anything. But in a particular yoga practice, you talk a lot about, because for me, yoga, let me gather my thoughts here. For me, yoga has always been a practice to really help everything else that I do in life. Not just, I'm confident that if you were to ask me to go on a hike after this without any training, I feel like with my yoga practice and some other cardio things that I do, that I think I would make it through the hike. And my hips wouldn't hurt, my knees wouldn't hurt. But you said really beautifully, if you were to pause a game of any professional athlete, you'd see them in these really crazy, funky positions, the knee over the toe, them leaning back. Like I paused the tennis game. I made a reel of it. You inspired me. These guys like Carlos Alcaraz and Sinner, like they're not in alignment. So why do we practice being in these particular shapes? They're so dogmatic and so esoteric about getting in the perfect posture. It almost becomes regressive. So what could you share with yogis to bring into their flow to help them be more proactive, productive?
I start from the end. There is a reason why to pursue these asanas. Don't let the pendulum swing back to the other side. I was more pointing at the fact that we need to practice both, being in alignment, studying what is optimal alignment, but also practicing out of alignment. People like to swing. Yoga offers a lot of knowledge, specific yoga practices. Of course, yoga is a very open word. It's an abused word. I almost feel bad for you guys when you use the word yoga, because who knows what the person listening on the other side, means, right?
It could be a near-death experience or laying in shavasana.
Exactly. It's
It's
everything.
pendulum.
It's almost every, and the same for me. When I talk about movement, it's totally. So I'm like cringy. But anyways, the two things must be practiced. And yes, many yogis do not practice coming out of alignment. Don't practice compensatory means. It's more about optimizing and optimizing and optimizing. Another thing is, of course, most yoga, and I look at how you're built and I hear the word power yoga, and this is, of course, the other direction, but most yogis have nothing in regards to power or strength. Another is the pulling, which I mentioned.
Pulling. Actually, I do a lot
hanging.
of calisthenics, which really, some people get frustrated when I say this, but the asanas are really, people tend to say that there's some special energy flow of the chakras when you get into certain poses, but I'm going to call that bullshit. I really do feel like the asanas were just creative ways to move the body, to touch different places in the body, but really they're just calisthenics from the East. Body weight movements that were cultivated in the East. And some people even argue they were stolen from gymnastics.
Yeah.
So I think when we give too much emphasis and power on the pose itself, it ruins the meaning. Because
yeah, it's a tool. It's a good tool, but it's not the end all be all, and there is more to investigate. And again, I'll keep giving some more directions for the yogis. So I gave a few counter directions to investigate. One is hanging or pulling, which is not often done. Get a bar, get some rings, start to hang. I have this challenge called the hanging challenge, which, became extremely popular and went all over the world. You can Google it, Ido Portal hanging challenge, various videos and blog posts about how to engage with it.
Excited for that.
Yeah, the second one is that we said is about the power or strength component, which is not so easily pursued within the asanas, which tend to be about getting deeper into the positions.
Or lengthening.
Yeah, lengthening. So there is something about not lengthening, being already gathered. And you can pursue it through strength training, calisthenics, all kinds of other things. Even within the asanas, it can be practiced as power yoga and other, attempts are there. Another direction, overly orderly practice versus chaotic practice. Learning to interact with more chaos.
What was that? Oh, learning to interact with more.
more disruptions,
Ooh.
more unknowns. So like, for example, when we will work together in this weekend, you will have to deal with disruptions, people trying to touch you, to hit you, to move, things falling, things you have to do on the ground while someone else is moving around you and doing this stuff. So it will take all your asanas, all the transitions, and it will fortify them. It will make them alive. It will inject life force into them. And then all your skills, you will be able to see first if they're actually useful. Maybe they're not. Second, you will be able to then get a plan for the future, how you wish to develop yourself in relation to such a thing. So that is another direction. Another direction, and I can keep going, right? But these are good things.
I'm really just kind of, it's so beautiful to hear this kind of spoken because it's something I felt. A lot of people think that the yoga practice is to be in a place that's free of adversity, free of difficulty, free of disruption. Like if you think about like the perfect yogi, you think of like someone meditating in a cave in the Himalayas, just no distractions, no suffering. But really it was the opposite. Yoga was meant to put you directly in the fire, yet
Totally.
remain calm and balanced in your mind and heart. So it'd be interesting, for me to do like a little yoga flow, but have you just disrupt me and see how I respond.
Yeah.
And I'm just excited to be a student in the workshop this weekend.
Yeah, excited to play
But
together.
it's wow, so many downloads, so many enlightening moments here. So thank you so much for creating the time. And yeah, I'll put some links in the description. And I'm excited for this weekend.
Thank you, Jonah.
Thank you, brother.